segment on robot ethics also leads to the notion that robots don't really have souls. Souls are a product of souls in one interpretation are a product of soul propagation through DNA capture, where where the DNA captures and remodulates different frequencies of photon energy into a shape that is similar and congruent to an organism's shape. Like, for instance, bunnies have fur while earthworms do not. And so by light passing through the clear substrate of solid DNA, the DNA will code around the robot structure, and it will leave an after image behind, where after the robot ceases functioning, the processor placed on a DNA substrate should still be harmonized to the robot's old thought patterns. It means that the robot would still be able to exist in that way after its processor stops working. So I don't have the means to actually test it, but theoretically, that is how DNA. That is one way DNA reprograms incoming light waves into useful machine structures that last long after the organism dies. These wires would be connected to the central comprehension processor, which would then also be sensitive to the light from the sun and other stars in the sky. Another major problem with the stars in the sky is that our sun takes up precedence and prevalence over the sky for half of the day. We only get the light from one star for half of the day, and every other star for the other half of the day. We know this from looking at the night sky and seeing the stars that the sun does not reflect the essence of a clear material, because naturally, if the sun's light was refined enough to resemble a transparent material like a mineral or something, then we should be able to see the stars through the day sky, which is not possible. This hard plate would also enable photosynthesis by capturing light and converting it to electricity. Plants can commence photosynthesis because their DNA allows their photons to be captured by photosystem 2, and it causes the bonding of hydrogen to nicotinamide dinucleophosphide to create NADPH, which can then be transferred into ATP to release phosphorus to form ADP. Which is basically how plants absorb sunlight to produce energy for their processes, instead of having to hunt for food. And animal DNA does not do that. And also, the differences between the chlorophyll, the magnesium-based chlorophyll, and the iron-based hemoglobin is that the chlorophyll is clear and greenish, while hemoglobin is not and reddish. So hemoglobin is like a denser, lower version or interpretation of chlorophyll, which does not directly absorb anywhere near as much sunlight as chlorophyll. The machine and death. The last problem to worry about would be the soul. All of the life has DNA embedded in it, and thus the soul leaves behind a soul when it does. This hardened DNA material is the hardest, purest form of DNA, and will allow a robot to have a soul much like every animal and plant. So it will allow a robot to have a soul much like every animal and plant. I was not bringing into consideration the kind of soul it would have naturally just by being a different sort of entity as it existed in real time, but it would have a soul similar to the way plants and animals have souls, because you would have DNA structures embedded in it, just like how animals and plants would have DNA structures embedded in their forms. It is possible to have an organism that can generate DNA structures that are clear and crystalline, that can operate within its body structure and not cause that animal any problems, and it won't face death, just like how a robot would face death. It would face death more similar to how an animal would face death, or a plant would face death. So it is an important aspect of biomemory. As souls, these robots should far exceed the human ability to explore these soul realms, and as such, it is important that they are able to make these discoveries ASAP. These robots will not only make better humans, but a humanoid would be able to make a much better starship as well. A robot soul should theoretically be able to analyze the data from the pastoral realms and transfer it back to the denser mortal realms. And an analogy I use for this is Power Rangers, who from the very first season were able to teleport their people without having any teleporters nearby. Something similar to that. It was the ability for them to literally be transformed into light beings and transfer their images across distances. These are my citations. I didn't really use many citations for this because I didn't really need many citations for it. So this is actually an earlier version of my insight into the realms of discovery. Wow. That's really, really, really interesting. Isn't it interesting? In this segment, we will be covering Introduction to Python, which is something I didn't write, but something my teacher wrote, and I have to review it for a class that I'm taking. There are two types of errors: syntax errors, interpreting stage for I in range 10, input print I, and exceptions, where exceptions happen if the file doesn't exist. Handling exceptions. Importing modules and packages. Class instances. Lasers. Return age of self. It should be age of self. Return age.self, not self.age. It's like another form of much more useful poetry. Poets should take programming instead. We could write haikus.